My daughter's voice came through her smartwatch, in broken pieces beneath the roar of floodwater. "Mom, I'm with Grandma." Dad took her phone and left in the yellow truck. "The wall says Shelter 6. The water is on the 3rd step. Please don't cross the bridge." 4 hours earlier, my mother had used her name on the school pickup list to take Sadie without telling me. Then she handed my 10-year-old daughter to the controlling ex-husband. A judge had ordered to see her only under supervision. "A child needs her father," Mom told me when I finally reached her. "We only wanted them to talk." Then police found Gavin's SUV, abandoned beside a washed-out bridge. Sadie's jacket half buried in the mud, and no sign of any of them. That one message proved my daughter was alive. It also proved her father had found a way out and chosen to leave her behind. What I still didn't know was that my mother had forged my name before they left. My brother had given Gavin access to a county truck, and the waterproof bag he carried out of the flood contained a plan that was never supposed to end with Sadie coming home. If you have ever been told that keeping the peace matters more than keeping a child safe, stay with me and subscribe, because after the rescue, my mother finally admitted what she had known before she took my daughter from school. Before I take you back to the moment everything began, tell me where you're listening from and stay with me until the end, because every choice my family made that afternoon changed what the word safety meant to us. At 11:32 that morning, I was standing beside a stroke patient's kitchen table, helping him shape the word coffee without forcing his jaw. Rain tapped hard against the windows, and his wife kept glancing toward the darkening yard. My phone vibrated against the counter. Cedar Hollow Elementary would dismiss students at 12:15 because the Hollis River was rising faster than expected. County crews were monitoring the old flood control huts along the service roads. For 1 second, the words took me back to my father, Dale. He had spent 30 years as a county road foreman and used to call Flood Control Hut 6 Shelter 6, as if the concrete box were a cabin instead of a maintenance building. I had not thought about that name in years. I texted the school that I was on my way, then called Sadie's classroom office to confirm. While I waited, I remembered our rushed breakfast. Sadie had held up her Apple Watch and frowned because an update had left it stuck in airplane mode. 3 steps, I had reminded her. Turn airplane mode off, open messages, and send me an audio clip. If there's no signal, move somewhere higher and try again. She had rolled her eyes in the gentle way 10-year-olds do when they believe their mothers repeat everything. "I know, Mom. I should have been at the school before noon, but my patient became dizzy when he stood." I could not leave until his wife had him safely seated, and the on-call nurse had taken over. Then a flooded intersection forced me onto a slower road. I pulled into the school lot at 12:48. Buses were already gone. Parents hurried through the rain with children pressed under umbrellas. I ran into the office, wet from the knees down, and gave the secretary Sadie's name. Her expression changed before she answered. Sadie was signed out at 12:16. "By whom?" I asked. "Your mother, Marjorie Reed." The room seemed to narrow around me. Mom had permission to pick Sadie up because she had helped during my divorce. She knew our family code and had collected her before. But I had not called her that morning. I didn't authorize that today. The secretary turned toward her computer. "She is listed as an approved pickup person. She used the correct code and signed the log." I called Mom. It rang until voicemail. I called again. This time, the call was rejected. My hands went cold. I opened the court-approved parenting app and typed Gavin's name with both thumbs. "Where is Sadie?" My mother removed her from school without my permission. "You are not authorized to see her outside supervised visitation. Return her immediately and send your location." The message showed as read, but no answer came. Gavin had always known how to use silence as a weapon. During our marriage, he would ignore 5 calls, then answer the 6th and speak softly while I was breathless. Later, he would tell people my repeated calls proved I was unstable. After I left him, I taught myself not to chase his silence. That afternoon, every second he refused to answer felt like a door closing between me and my child. The principal brought me into a small conference room and pulled up the security footage. At 12:16, Mom walked through the front doors holding Sadie's hand. Sadie wore her yellow rain jacket and carried the backpack with her paper animals pinned to the zipper. She did not look frightened. She looked relieved to see someone she trusted. The exterior camera showed Mom's sedan leaving the school lot. It did not show where she went after that. I called her again. This time she answered. "Mom, where are you?" Her voice was too measured. "Naomi, calm down. Put Sadie on the phone. She's fine. Gavin only wanted to take her for hot chocolate and talk without you making everything tense." A low road hum filled the background. Then I heard Gavin's voice, distant but unmistakable. "Hang up, Marjorie." My heart slammed against my ribs. "You are in his car," Mom inhaled sharply. "I'm making sure everything stays peaceful. Tell me where you are." "You have turned every conversation into a court case. Gavin is under an immediate temporary order. He can only see Sadie at the supervised visitation center. You know that." "I know what you told me." "No, you saw the order." For the first time, anger slipped through her careful tone. "A child needs her father, Naomi." The call ended. I stared at the dark screen for half a second, then dialed 911. I did not tell the dispatcher my entire marriage. I gave her the order date, October 8. I explained Gavin's supervised contact restriction, provided his license plate, described Sadie's clothes, and sent a current photograph through the emergency link. "My mother was authorized to pick her up," I said, forcing each word to stay clear. "She was not authorized to transfer her to Gavin. He knows the order. He has my daughter now, and they will not tell me where they are." Police reached the school within minutes. Detective Owen Park arrived carrying a rain-darkened folder. He asked for the court order, then read the section restricting Gavin to 90 minutes a week at a designated center. My phone rang again. It was Mom, and I put it on speaker. "I gave Gavin the early dismissal schedule," she said. Her voice cracked, but she still sounded more offended than afraid. "We only wanted them to talk. Where is Sadie?" Rain battered something metal on her end. I heard static, then Gavin shouting that she had said enough. "Mom, tell me where you are." The line went dead. Owen looked down at the signed order in his hands. "This is not a family misunderstanding." Before I could answer, his radio came alive. A deputy reported that a vehicle matching Gavin's SUV had just been seen heading toward Hollis River Bridge, where rising water had already forced county crews to close one approach. Owen looked at me, and I understood that my mother had not merely ignored my warning. She had used the access I trusted her with to place my daughter inside the one man's control I had fought for 2 years to escape. Detective Owen Park moved us out of the front office and into the school conference room, where the principal cleared one end of the table for laptops, radios, and the folder containing my court orders. Rain blurred the windows behind him, turning the parking lot into a gray sheet of moving water. I emailed him the permanent parenting plan from my phone, then handed over the immediate temporary order I had printed after the October hearing. Owen read the paragraph, limiting Gavin to 90 minutes of supervised contact each week, and asked whether Gavin had been officially served. "Yes." His attorney acknowledged it in court. "And your mother knew about it. She saw the order at my house. She told me I was humiliating him." Owen made a note without commenting. That restraint helped more than sympathy would have. I did not need anyone to tell me my mother had betrayed me. I needed them to help me find Sadie. He asked about her smartwatch. I told him it had its own cellular line, but the last location still showed Cedar Hollow Elementary. "It could be out of service," I said, "or airplane mode could still be on." He asked me to try again while a deputy contacted the carrier. The call failed. I stared at Sadie's school photograph and imagined the watch close enough for her to touch but unable to reach me. Owen sat across from me. "I need to understand why the court restricted Gavin's contact." The question pulled at every old instinct Gavin had trained into me. I wanted to begin at the beginning, to explain each apology, each rule, each time he convinced someone that his control was concern. I could have spent an hour proving I had not overreacted. Instead, I gave Owen 3 facts. During our marriage, he canceled our shared credit card because I bought movie tickets without asking him. He called my clinic when I was 12 minutes late, getting home and demanded that the receptionist verify I was still there. After we separated, he appeared at Sadie's therapy appointment, even though the location had only been shared with immediate family. Owen's eyes lifted at the last one. Did you ever determine who told him? No, I said. The answer sounded different now than it had that morning. Before Sadie disappeared, it had been an unanswered question. Now it felt like the first opening in a wall I had trusted. I called my brother. Keith answered on the 4th ring with machinery rumbling behind him. Naomi, I heard Mom picked Sadie up. I'm sure this is being blown out of proportion. Gavin has Sadie, and the police are looking for them. The machinery stopped. Keith did not speak. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the table. Owen leaned closer but let me continue. Did Gavin call you today? Not really, Keith said. That is not an answer. He asked about the weather. Did you give him a road around the closures? Keith exhaled hard. I told him which service road usually stays open longer. That's all. Owen slid a notepad toward me. I wrote service road and circled it. Did you know he was taking Sadie? He said Mom was helping them talk. Did you know they planned to stay overnight? Another pause followed. This one was long enough to answer for him. Keith, I warned. He mentioned a cabin, he said. 2 nights, maybe. He said he wanted time with her without you turning everything into a fight. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Where is the cabin? I don't know. He only asked me to pick Mom up around 4 at the Westridge travel stop. He never gave me the cabin address. What road did you send him? It's an old county route near Hollis River. It cuts around the main bridge approach. Send me every message between you and Gavin. Keith's voice hardened. I already told you what he said. Owen spoke for the first time. Mr. Reed, this is Detective Owen Park with the Kittitas County Sheriff's Office. A 10-year-old child is missing, with a parent who is currently restricted to supervised contact. Preserve the entire message thread. Do not delete, alter, or forward selected screenshots. Send the complete conversation to the number I am texting you now. Keith became quiet. Owen continued. Do you understand? Yes, Keith said. Say it clearly. I understand, he answered. Owen ended the call before I could ask why he had helped Gavin hide from me. I wanted to call back, but Owen stopped me with a small movement of his hand. Let him send the messages. He knew they were going away. He admitted enough for us to change the search. At 2:02, while we waited for the message thread, Keith deleted part of it. I did not know that then. All I knew was that the file he finally sent had gaps, where the conversation jumped from Gavin asking about flood closures to Keith telling him to be careful. A deputy entered carrying a tablet inside a plastic evidence sleeve. She had contacted the only gas station between Cedar Hollow and the bridge. The owner had given her access to the camera system. The video showed Gavin's SUV at 126. He stepped out wearing a dark rain jacket and walked toward the pumps. He moved without urgency, as though he were beginning an ordinary road trip. He filled a red fuel can, then went inside and returned with bottled water, packaged food, batteries, and a child's plastic rain poncho. Mom sat in the front passenger seat. Sadie sat in the back. The camera angle was too high to show her expression clearly, but I saw her turn toward Mom as Gavin placed the bags in the rear cargo area. Sadie did not pull at the door. She did not wave for help. She stayed where she was because the woman beside her had spent 10 years teaching her that Grandma was safe. That poncho isn't hers, I said. Owen looked at me. She wore her yellow jacket to school. He bought another one because he was planning for something. Or because of the rain, he said carefully. I understood why he would not call it evidence of a longer plan yet, but the fuel can and packaged food had changed the shape of the day. Hot chocolate did not require extra gasoline. A conversation did not require 2 nights at a cabin. The image froze with Mom's profile, visible through the windshield. I remembered sitting at her kitchen table months earlier, trying to explain why the court had restricted Gavin. "He never hit you," she had said. "You had a difficult marriage. That doesn't mean he's dangerous." She had treated the absence of bruises as proof that nothing else counted. She had decided that because Gavin's control did not look violent to her, my fear was only bitterness. Now she had used that belief to overrule a judge. A dispatcher called Owen's radio. The final traffic camera, still operating near the western approach, had captured Gavin's SUV, turning away from the highway and entering a county service road at 211. The next camera on that route had lost power when a transformer failed in the storm. Owen pulled up the county map. The service road appeared as a thin gray line running beside the river before disappearing into maintenance land. He called Keith again. My brother answered immediately this time. Owen did not ask whether Keith believed Gavin was a good father. He did not ask what Mom had intended. He placed the map in front of us and asked one question. "Where does this road go?" Keith's voice came through the speaker, smaller than before. "It runs past 6 old flood control huts," he said. "Then it climbs to a maintenance vehicle yard on higher ground." Keith's answer left the conference room silent. 6 flood control huts, a maintenance yard on higher ground, a road Gavin had asked about before taking my daughter. Detective Owen Park pulled the county map closer and asked Keith to stay on the line. Before my brother could explain more, a deputy's voice broke through the radio. Gavin's SUV had been found near the western approach to Hollis River Bridge. The vehicle was empty. Owen drove me as far as the emergency roadblock. Rain struck the windshield hard enough to drown out most of the radio traffic. County trucks, fire engines, and sheriff's vehicles filled both shoulders ahead of us. Beyond their flashing lights, I could see the river spreading across land that should have been dry. A deputy stopped us before the damaged approach. The pavement ahead had buckled where water had eaten away the ground underneath it. Gavin's SUV sat crooked on the shoulder, several hundred feet before the broken section. It had not plunged into the river. It had simply stopped where muddy water had risen over the road. The open rear door made my knees weaken. Sadie's yellow jacket lay partly buried beside the vehicle, one sleeve filled with brown water. Owen caught my arm before I crossed the barrier. "The jacket is near the car. That does not mean she went into the river." The fabric was not torn, and had fallen beside the door, not downstream. A volunteer photographed it before sealing it in an evidence bag. A deputy crouched near the edge of the service road. He pointed to impressions pressed into the wet ground. 2 sets belonged to adults. The third was smaller. "They walked away from the SUV," he said. The prints continued along the narrow road running beside the river. Gavin's steps were deep and widely spaced. Mom's were shorter. Sadie's fell between them. After a few hundred feet, heavy rain blurred the edges until the trail disappeared. They had all left the car alive. Relief came with a new fear. Whatever happened next had begun beyond those last visible footprints. Owen allowed me to look inside the SUV, from behind the evidence line. 3 paper cups sat in the holders. One still had the coffee sleeve from the gas station. A bottle of Mom's pain reliever had rolled beneath the passenger seat. Packaged food and 2 bottles of water remained in the rear cargo area, but the fuel can was gone. Mom's purse was missing. So was Sadie's backpack. A circular mark beside Sadie's booster showed where her rigid backpack had stood. She always kept it upright to protect the paper animals on its zipper. Someone had taken it when they left. Gavin had not pulled them from a sinking vehicle in blind panic. He had chosen what to carry and led them along the service road. The waterproof duffel from the gas station footage was also gone. "What would he keep in that?" Owen asked. "I don't know. Gavin often traveled with documents, but I had no evidence yet that the bag held anything except clothes." Keith arrived 20 minutes later in his towing jacket, dressed like a man coming to solve someone else's emergency. "I came to help," he said. "You already helped. You gave Gavin this road. His face tightened. I didn't know the bridge would wash out. That is not the question anyone asked. Owen stepped between us before the argument could pull attention away from Sadie. He opened the county map on the hood of his vehicle and asked Keith to show him the flood control huts. Keith pointed along the gray service line. Huts 1 through 5 are close to the main road. They're concrete utility shelters, mostly used for equipment now. Hut 6 is farther up, about 1.5 miles beyond the bridge approach. It sits on higher ground. What is above it? Owen asked. A small maintenance yard. Truck 14 is usually kept there during flood season. The yard is maybe 300 yards uphill from Hut 6. The number pulled back a childhood memory. Dad had taken Keith and me along those roads during county open house weekends. Hut 6 was larger than the others, with a steel door, 6 broad steps to a raised machinery level, and Shelter 6 painted on the far wall. Once, during a summer storm, Dad made us count the steps and told us to climb if water entered the lower room. The memory did not prove Sadie was there. It only confirmed the building existed, and Gavin knew the road leading toward it. Owen asked Keith who could enter the maintenance yard. County crews, Keith said. Some contractors, but only when they're dispatched. Your towing company has a county subcontract for roadside emergencies, so you have access. Keith glanced at me before looking back at Owen. I have access when Public Works calls me. He did not mention giving Gavin a gate code. He did not mention a lockbox or Truck 14. At the time, I did not know those details existed. I only noticed that every answer he gave was narrower than the question. I called Sadie's watch again. The call failed before it could ring. If Gavin turned on airplane mode, the location would stop updating, I told Owen. The watch could still be on her wrist and look dead from here. Would she know how to turn it back off? Yes, I said. The certainty in my answer gave me one small thing to hold. Sadie knew the steps. The question was whether she had the watch, whether she could reach it, and whether any signal existed beyond the bridge. Owen sent one team toward the riverbank, another along the safest service road access, while Public Works checked the maintenance yard. I stayed beside his command vehicle. Running toward the water would only create another emergency, so I answered questions about Sadie's clothes, her fear of deep water, and how she might respond to rescuers. At 3:34, Public Works called back. Their tracking systems still listed Truck 14 as parked in the maintenance yard. No dispatcher had authorized its use that afternoon. The yard camera had lost power during the outage, so no one could confirm whether the truck was physically there. Keith looked away when Owen repeated that information. A search team farther up the service road reported finding fresh tire tracks near the maintenance yard. They were wider than Gavin's SUV tires and deep enough to come from a county utility truck. The tracks led away from the river toward the eastern evacuation route. Someone had driven out of the high ground after Gavin's SUV was abandoned. The discovery gave me hope and terrified me at the same time. Sadie might have reached shelter. She might have been moved into another vehicle. Or someone might have taken the only working truck and left her behind. By 4 o'clock, the rain had darkened the afternoon until the emergency lights reflected off every wet surface. I stood under the raised rear door of Owen's vehicle, staring at the unmoving location circle on my phone. At 4:06, the screen changed. A notification appeared from the cellular number assigned to Sadie's watch. It was not a location update or a completed call. An audio message had arrived, its progress bar filling slowly as weak data came through. I pressed my thumb against the screen and watched my daughter's voice begin to download. The progress bar stopped twice before the audio file finally opened. At first, all I heard was rushing water, wind striking metal, and a broken breath that sounded too small to belong inside that noise. Then Sadie's voice pushed through. "Mom, I'm with Grandma." Dad took her phone and left in the yellow truck. "The wall says Shelter 6. The water is on the 3rd step. Grandma hurt her ankle. Please don't cross the bridge." My knees weakened, and I caught the edge of Owen's table. Sadie was alive, frightened, and somewhere beyond the river. Then the rest of the message separated from the noise. Gavin had left. Mom was injured, and the water was rising. Owen took my phone only after I nodded. He played the message again, holding the speaker close, while the dispatcher lowered the radio volume around us. This time I heard the strain in Sadie's breathing. I heard her pause before saying Grandma, as though she had turned to make sure Mom was still beside her. I heard something loose rattling against concrete. Owen confirmed the message came from the watch's own cellular line. Keith looked from my phone to the river as if he had never considered it could work without mine nearby. Gavin always assumed it worked like a regular paired watch, I said. I could not know what had happened inside yet. I only knew Sadie had remembered enough of our morning instructions to reach me once. The county map showed 2 places connected to the number 6, a modern evacuation center and flood control hut 6. The old hut, I said. Sadie said the wall says shelter 6. Those words are painted inside the maintenance building. Keith looked at me. He remembered it too. I closed my eyes for half a second and forced the building back into focus. Damp concrete, steel door, raised machinery floor. There are 6 wide steps inside, I said. The lower level takes water first. If it has reached the 3rd step, the upper platform should still be above it, but not by much. A woman in a red rescue jacket approached the table. Captain Rosa Alvarez had been coordinating the teams near the damaged bridge. Rain ran from the brim of her helmet as Owen replayed Sadie's message. Alvarez listened once, then asked me to describe the structure. The entrance is on the south side. The main door is steel and opens outward. Any other access? There's a louvered window high on the west wall. It was above the machinery level. I don't know whether it still opens. What happens to the front door if the foundation shifts? It can jam. My father once had to use a pry bar after spring flooding. Alvarez turned to her radio operator. Move the riverbank team off the bridge approach. Send them to the lower launch. We'll cross the Calmer branch, come up the western slope, and approach Hut 6 from high ground. The operator repeated the instruction. In less than a minute, the search had changed direction because Sadie had remembered a painted wall and counted 3 wet steps. For the first time since I reached the school, I was no longer trying to convince someone that Gavin was dangerous. I was giving people information they could act on. Keith moved closer to the map. The ground between the hut and the maintenance yard is higher than the service road. Owen turned toward him. Then tell us everything about Truck 14. Keith's face lost what little color remained. I already told you it's stored uphill. You said only county crews and dispatched contractors could enter that yard. That's true, Keith said. Do you have the gate code? Keith rubbed a hand over his wet hair. My company has an emergency subcontract. That was not my question. Yes, he admitted. Did you give the code to Gavin? Keith looked at me before answering. That glance told me he was still measuring the truth by how much damage it would do to him. I sent him the gate code, he said. He said he wanted a backup route in case the roads closed. Owen's voice stayed level. What else? There's a lockbox near the equipment shed. Truck 14's spare key is kept there during flood season. You sent him the lockbox location? Keith swallowed. Yes. The admission landed differently from the service road. A road could still be called advice. A key location was access. You gave him a county truck, I said. I gave him information. I never thought he would actually take it. He asked you how to avoid the main roads, how to enter a locked yard, and where to find a vehicle during an emergency. I thought he wanted options. For taking my daughter where I could not find her. Keith opened his mouth, but Owen cut him off. Was there a separate code for the key box? Keith nodded and recited it. Owen transmitted the information to dispatch. Within moments, a county-wide alert went out for Truck 14, a yellow maintenance vehicle with Public Works markings. Checkpoints were instructed to look not only for a missing child, but for a man traveling alone in a county truck. That final instruction tightened something inside me. Sadie had said Gavin left in the yellow truck. She had not said he took her. Owen must have seen the realization on my face. The message places Sadie with your mother at the shelter, and Gavin somewhere else. We are looking for both. Captain Alvarez headed for the rescue transport, and I followed. I'm coming with you. She stopped. If I take someone without swift water training, I spend personnel protecting you instead of reaching your daughter. Stay where we can ask you questions. Standing still felt like abandonment, but Sadie's last words returned to me. Please don't cross the bridge. Ignoring her would turn her warning into another emergency. I stepped back. Bring her home. That is the plan. Before the rescue vehicles moved, I opened messages and pressed the audio button. I kept my voice steady, because Sadie did not need to hear what fear had done to me. Stay high. Don't enter moving water. Help is coming. I heard you. The message showed as sending, then paused. I left it there. I did not know whether it would reach her, and no second message came back. The rescue team crossed from the lower access point, left the boat beneath a wooded slope, and climbed toward the hut. I stayed beside Owen, answering questions about the west window and the raised platform. At 4:24, Alvarez's voice came over the radio. We have the roof in sight. I gripped the edge of the table. Then she continued. The ground between the hut and the maintenance yard is cut off by moving water. We have tire tracks on the far side. Owen enlarged the aerial map, while the next transmission came through. The tracks were wide, fresh, and headed away from Shelter 6. Truck 14 had left the high ground, and whoever drove it had chosen the only route still open out of the flood zone. From the command vehicle, I could see only the rescue team's lights moving through the trees across the flooded ground. Everything that had happened inside Shelter 6 reached me later through Sadie's forensic interview, Mom's statement, and the marks left behind on the concrete. At 4:25 that afternoon, all I knew was that my daughter was somewhere inside the building and Gavin had driven away. Sadie later told me the SUV had died before they reached the damaged bridge. Water covered the road ahead, and Gavin ordered them out as though the storm were an inconvenience he had already planned around. He carried the waterproof duffel over one shoulder. Mom kept her purse pressed beneath her coat. Sadie wore her backpack and followed them because Mom had told her I knew about the trip. Before they left the SUV, Gavin noticed the Apple Watch beneath Sadie's sleeve. He switched on airplane mode and dropped it into her backpack instead of destroying it. He was still insisting I had approved the trip, and smashing her watch in front of Sadie would have exposed that lie too early. Mom watched him do it. The watch needs Naomi's phone nearby anyway, she said. That mistaken sentence helped Gavin believe he had silenced the only device Sadie could use to reach me. The three of them walked along the service road through rain that struck sideways. By the time they reached Shelter 6, water had begun spilling over the lower edge of the foundation, but the entrance was still clear. Mom told police she knew then that Gavin had lied about the cabin. The concrete utility hut had no beds, no heat, and no road leading toward Wenatchee. She saw the painted words on the wall and asked where he was really taking them. Gavin did not answer. Before climbing toward the maintenance yard, Gavin took the waterproof duffel and Mom's phone, which he had grabbed when she tried to call me. He had remembered the gate code and lockbox information Keith sent him. He told them he was going to find a safer vehicle and would return in a few minutes. While he was gone, the storm changed the ground around the hut. Water crossed the service lane in a shallow sheet, then deepened quickly. Mom stepped outside to see whether Gavin was coming back. Mud shifted beneath her shoe, and she fell against the concrete threshold. Her ankle twisted under her. Sadie could not lift her. She was 10 years old, wet, frightened, and much smaller than the woman lying beside her. What she did was simpler and more believable, but it still saved Mom from being trapped on the lower floor. An orange utility strap hung from a hook near the machinery stairs. Sadie dragged it down, looped one end around the metal handrail, and handed the other to Mom. "You pull with your arms," she told her. "I'll keep your bad foot straight." Mom used her good leg and both hands to move backward one step at a time. Sadie stayed beside the injured ankle, lifting it just enough to stop it striking the concrete. It took them several minutes to climb 6 steps. By the time they reached the raised machinery platform, water had entered the lower room. Sadie opened her backpack to find something dry for Mom and discovered the watch beneath a paper fox she had made for school. She remembered the instructions I had repeated that morning. She turned off airplane mode and opened messages. The first audio clip failed. The screen showed, "Not delivered." She tried again from the upper platform, but there was still no signal. At the command vehicle, Captain Alvarez's team reported that they had reached the western slope. The mud was slowing them, and the moving water between the trees made a direct approach impossible. I stood with one hand against the table, answering every question they asked. I knew where the upper window had been 20 years earlier. I knew the platform covered only the northern half of the building. I did not know whether Sadie was still above the water. Then Truck 14 returned to Shelter 6. Sadie heard the engine before she saw the yellow vehicle through the high window. Gavin had found the truck and driven it down from the maintenance yard, but the service lane between him and the hut was no longer a road. Water rushed through it fast enough to carry branches. He stopped on the opposite side and shouted for Sadie to come out. Mom could not stand. Her ankle had swollen inside her shoe, and she could barely move without using the strap. Sadie opened the steel door only far enough to see Gavin through the rain. He pointed toward the truck and told her the water was not deep. Sadie watched pieces of wood spin past his tires. "My mom says not to walk in moving water," she called back. Gavin told her she was making everything harder. Then he said Mom had filled her head with fear and that if she loved him, she would come. Sadie did not argue with him. She looked at the water and stayed inside. Mom later admitted she begged Gavin to use the truck radio and call the county. Truck 14 was an emergency vehicle. The radio was mounted beside the steering wheel, and the maintenance yard remained on higher ground. He could have waited there. He could have called their location. He could have remained close enough to guide rescuers back. Instead, he looked toward the eastern road, where the last open route was beginning to flood. The waterproof duffel and Mom's phone were already inside the truck. He shouted that he would find help. Then he drove away. He did not use the radio. He did not stop at the maintenance yard. He chose the road leading out of the flood zone. Inside the shelter, Mom began to shake. Part of it was cold, but Sadie said her voice changed after the truck disappeared. She stopped, insisting Gavin would return. She leaned against the wall and stared down at the water reaching the steps. Sadie kept talking to her, not because she believed an injured person could never sleep, but because Mom had begun saying she was too tired to keep trying. Sadie asked her to name the paper animals inside the backpack. She asked which pie she planned to make for Thanksgiving. When Mom stopped answering, Sadie squeezed her hand and asked another question. The water reached the 3rd step. Sadie climbed onto the machinery platform and moved as close as she could to the broken ventilation opening near the upper wall. She held the watch toward the gap. For a moment, one bar of LTE appeared. She pressed retry. That was when the message reached me. After sending it, the signal disappeared again. Sadie never knew whether I had heard her. She only knew she had tried. At 4:48, Alvarez's team reported that the steel entrance door would not move. Mud and shifting debris had pressed against the lower frame. They began working around the western wall toward the high window. I listened to boots, scrape stone, and ropes tighten through the radio. Every burst of static made me think I had missed the sentence that mattered. Then one rescuer reported hearing metal striking metal. Sadie had found a loose section of pipe beside the old machinery. Each time she heard an engine or a human voice outside, she hit the pipe against the handrail in a steady rhythm. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. The rescue team followed the sound to the upper window. They secured a safety line to a tree above the hut and lowered one firefighter across the unstable slope. The lower door remained trapped. Water had reached the 4th step. The firefighter struck the metal louvers with a pry tool. One panel bent inward, another broke free. Through the radio, I heard Alvarez tell someone to widen the opening. Then came a short silence that felt longer than the entire afternoon. A man's voice finally broke through. "We have visual on the child." I closed my eyes, but before relief could fully reach me, another transmission came from the eastern checkpoint. Truck 14 was approaching through the evacuation line. A single man was driving it. Sadie was still inside Shelter 6. When the eastern checkpoint reported that Truck 14 was approaching with one man behind the wheel. I wanted Detective Owen Park to send every available deputy after Gavin. At the same time, I wanted every rescuer to remain beside that broken window until my daughter was out. The two emergencies pulled in opposite directions, and I could do nothing but stand beneath the open door of the command vehicle, listening to both unfold over separate radio channels. Captain Alvarez's voice came through first. The firefighter at the window had widened the opening enough to reach inside. Sadie was standing on the machinery platform with water below her knees on the stairs. She was wet, shaking, and responsive. "Can she move on her own?" Alvarez asked. The answer arrived through static. "Yes, child is ambulatory." I pressed both hands over my mouth. A rescue harness was passed through the window. The firefighter secured it around Sadie and brought her out onto the slope. No second collapse followed. No rope snapped. The team guided her across the unstable ground, one careful step at a time. When Alvarez confirmed Sadie had reached the medical crew, my body seemed to remember breathing. She had mild hypothermia, several scrapes on her legs and hands, and no obvious major injury. She was exhausted but awake. She asked whether anyone had found me. Alvarez told her I was waiting. The team returned for Mom. Her ankle had swollen badly, so they splinted it before lifting her through the same window. She could not put weight on it, but she had no broken bone visible through the initial assessment and no signs of a serious head injury. I did not run toward the river. I stayed where the rescuers could reach me, because Sadie had already asked me not to cross the bridge, and because becoming another person they had to save would not bring her closer. Owen turned from the rescue radio to the channel handling Truck 14. "If Gavin is alone, where does he go?" he asked. The answer came more easily than I expected. "Somewhere with witnesses." Owen looked at me. "He won't hide in the woods unless he has no other choice. He needs people around him so he can tell them his version first. He'll go to a checkpoint, an evacuation center, or a gas station. He'll act like he was trying to help. He knows officers will be searching for the truck. He'll believe being visible makes him look innocent." Gavin had done that throughout our marriage. He never shouted where anyone could hear him. He waited until we were alone, then walked into a room full of people and became the calm husband coping with an unreasonable wife. Owen relayed the warning to the eastern checkpoint. Deputies were told not to approach, as though they had found a frightened motorist. They were dealing with a man connected to a missing child, driving a county vehicle he had no authorization to use. "There was a waterproof duffel," I added. "It disappeared from his SUV. What do you think is in it?" "I don't know, but Gavin never leaves important paperwork behind. If he left Sadie and still took that bag, he believes it helps whatever story he plans to tell next." At 5:14, Truck 14 reached the checkpoint. I heard the deputy order the driver to stop, shut off the engine, and place both hands where they could be seen. Gavin complied without arguing. He stepped down slowly, wearing the same dark rain jacket from the gas station footage. He told them he had borrowed the truck because his SUV had become stranded. He said he was driving out to find rescue crews for his daughter and Marjorie. His voice sounded controlled even through the radio. A deputy asked why he had not used the county radio mounted inside the truck. Gavin said he had tried, but there was no signal. The dispatcher immediately confirmed that Truck 14's radio had connected with the county network minutes earlier when the vehicle passed a repeater. Gavin changed his explanation. He said he had not known how to operate it. Then a deputy saw Mom's phone in the cup holder. Gavin first said she had given it to him so he could call for help. When reminded that no call had been placed, he said she must have left it in the vehicle. Only after officers told him Sadie's message stated he had taken the phone did he claim he had grabbed it accidentally while gathering supplies. Each answer replaced the previous one without acknowledging the contradiction. The deputy reported a sealed waterproof duffel on the passenger side floor. Owen ordered them not to open it at the checkpoint. The truck and bag would be impounded, sealed, and searched only after the proper warrant had been obtained. Gavin's careful story began to lose its shape anyway. He had taken a county vehicle without permission. He had violated the court order limiting him to supervised contact. My daughter's message placed him at Shelter 6 before he drove away alone. He had Mom's phone, an emergency radio he had not used, and no record of calling for help. Deputies placed him under arrest based on the evidence they already had. The final charges would be decided later, but that afternoon they had probable cause tied to the unauthorized truck, the violation of the parenting order, taking Sadie outside his permitted contact, and leaving her in danger. He did not get to speak to me. He did not get to ask Sadie for one more conversation. He did not get to arrive at the hospital and perform concern in front of witnesses. By the time the ambulance carrying Sadie reached Kittitas Valley Healthcare, I was waiting inside the emergency entrance. A nurse led me to a treatment bay before I could see Mom. Sadie lay beneath heated blankets, her damp hair combed away from her face. A small bandage covered one scrape near her temple, and the skin around her lips was still pale. The Apple Watch rested in a clear belongings bag beside her clothes. A fresh scratch crossed the glass. I stopped beside the bed because I was afraid that touching her too quickly would hurt something the doctors had not found. Sadie lifted one hand from beneath the blanket. I took it. Her fingers were cold, but they closed around mine. "You heard me?" she asked. "I heard you. You didn't cross the bridge, right?" "No." I moved closer and kissed her forehead. "I stayed where Captain Alvarez could ask me questions. You told me not to go into the water, and I listened." Her eyes closed briefly with relief. I had expected her to need proof that I had fought harder, run farther, or ignored every rule to reach her. Instead, she needed to know that one adult had listened when she spoke. "Where's Dad?" she asked. "The police found him. Is he coming here?" "No, you do not have to see him." She stared at our joined hands. "He said he was getting help." I did not tell her about the working radio, Mom's phone, or the duffel sealed inside the truck. Those answers belonged to investigators and later conversations, not to a child still shivering under hospital blankets. "You did the right thing by staying out of the water," I said. "Nothing that happened after that was your fault." A nurse entered to check Sadie's temperature and examine the scrapes on her legs. The doctor believed she would recover without being admitted overnight if her body temperature continued rising. Mom was undergoing imaging for her ankle in another section of the emergency department. Sadie watched the doorway whenever footsteps passed. Nearly an hour later, an orderly pushed Mom through the hall in a wheelchair. Her injured leg was elevated, and a temporary brace ran from her foot to below her knee. She looked smaller than she had that morning, but not innocent. Sadie saw her through the open curtain. She did not ask whether Grandma was in pain. She did not ask whether the doctors would let her go home. She turned toward me, and the fear in her face had changed. It was no longer fear of the river or the locked shelter. It was the fear of learning that someone she trusted had known more than she admitted. "Grandma knew we weren't coming home tonight, didn't she?" I could have softened it. I could have told her we would discuss it later or that Grandma had made a mistake. Instead, I gave her the part of the truth I could already confirm. "She knew you were supposed to be gone for 2 nights, I said. "I'm still finding out what else she knew." Sadie kept watching me after I told her Grandma had known they were supposed to be gone for 2 nights. The heated blanket hummed softly around her, and rain ticked against the emergency room window. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were clear. "Why didn't she tell you?" "Because she thought she knew better. Because she wanted to prove I had exaggerated Gavin. Because my mother had spent 2 years treating every boundary I set as an accusation against the family she wanted to believe we still had." I gave Sadie the part she could carry. Because she knew I would say no. Her fingers tightened around mine. Does Grandma think you're bad? The question hurt more than anger would have. Sadie was still trying to understand the adults around her by deciding which one of us must be wrong. I think Grandma believed she was right, I said. Adults can love a child and still make a dangerous choice because they want to be right more than they want to listen. Sadie stared toward the open curtain where Mom had passed in the wheelchair. She told me you knew. I didn't, I said. She said it was a surprise. I know. Her face folded inward, not into tears but into silence. I had seen that expression before whenever Gavin made her feel responsible for choosing between us. You did not cause this, I told her. You did not make Grandma lie. You did not make your father take you. The adults who made those choices are responsible for them. A nurse entered to check Sadie's temperature. While she adjusted the blankets, Detective Owen Park appeared outside the curtain and waited until I stepped into the hall. Your mother is asking to speak with you, he said. The doctor will allow a short conversation. Has she given a statement? Only part of one. She keeps saying she misunderstood the trip. I looked back at Sadie. A hospital social worker had joined the nurse and was showing her how to hold a warm cup without touching the scrape across her palm. I'll speak to Mom alone. Owen led me to a small consultation room near imaging. Mom sat in a wheelchair with her injured ankle elevated. A temporary brace covered most of her lower leg. Her wet clothes had been replaced with a hospital gown and a thin robe. She looked frightened. That did not make her innocent. The moment the door closed, she reached for me. Naomi, I am so sorry. I stayed beside the wall. What did you know before you took Sadie from school? Mom's hand fell back into her lap. Gavin told me he wanted 2 nights with her. He said he had arranged a cabin near Wenatchee, where they could talk without lawyers and therapists watching every word. You knew he was taking her overnight. I was going with them. For how long? A few hours. Keith was supposed to pick me up at the West Ridge travel stop around 4. Gavin never gave either of us the cabin address. The answer settled another piece into place. Mom had planned to help Gavin get Sadie comfortable, leave at a public meeting point, and abandon my daughter to a man the court had restricted to supervised visits. You knew I would never agree. You would not even discuss it. That is not the same thing. You had already decided he was dangerous. A judge had already ordered supervised contact. Mom looked toward the door, as if the court order were an unfair guest who had followed us into the hospital. I thought if Sadie spent time with him without feeling your fear, she would remember how much he loved her. You told her I knew about the trip. I didn't want her upset. You lied because the truth would have made her refuse. Mom's mouth tightened. She is 10. Children do not always know what is best for them. And neither did you. She flinched, but I kept going. What did you sign? Her face changed. It was a small reaction, but I recognized it. Gavin used to pause the same way, when deciding which version of an answer would cost him the least. What paper, Mom? Gavin said we might need something if a hotel or doctor asked questions. What was it called? I don't remember exactly. You signed it. She looked down at her hands. Temporary travel and medical authorization. The title sounded official enough to reassure someone who wanted to be reassured. What did it say? That you had agreed for Sadie to travel with Gavin until Saturday and that he could make emergency medical decisions if necessary. I never signed that. I know, Mom whispered, and the room seemed to lose its air. Whose name did you write? Mom's eyes filled with tears. Yours. And then? I asked. I signed my own name as a witness. She had not misunderstood a conversation. She had not simply trusted the wrong person. She had written my name beneath a lie and used her own signature to make it look real. Was it notarized? No, she said. Did you believe it overruled the court order? No, but Gavin said it could stop people from panicking long enough for him to explain. Explain what? I asked. That you had approved the trip. But I hadn't. Mom covered her face. I know that now. You knew it when you signed my name. She lowered her hands. I thought you would be angry, but I thought once Sadie came home happy you would understand. The logic was so complete inside her that it had survived a flooded road, an abandoned vehicle, and my daughter trapped inside a concrete hut. She had believed the outcome would absolve every choice that came before it. If this was only a harmless weekend? I asked. Why did Gavin need a false authorization for police or a motel? Mom's eyes moved away from mine. He said you might call the police before he had time to talk to them. So you knew the paper was meant to help him get past my report. I knew you would react. You mean I would protect my daughter? Mom's voice broke. I never thought he would leave us there. The words carried fear, shame, and the beginning of a request for mercy. You didn't have to know he would abandon her, I said. You only had to know I said he was not allowed to take her. She began crying then, quietly at first. Please tell Sadie I never meant for her to be hurt. No, I said, and Mom looked up. She is lying in a hospital bed because you decided her fear and my court order mattered less than your opinion. You do not get to ask her to make you feel better about that. I need her to know I love her. She needed you to act like someone who loved her before you handed her to Gavin. For several seconds, the only sound in the room was the heater clicking beneath the window. Then Mom whispered, Keith told Gavin about the truck. I know he gave him the road and the gate code. It was more than that. Keith said the maintenance yard was above the flood line. He told Gavin that if the road crews pulled out, Truck 14 might still be there. She looked at me as if sharing Keith's part could make hers smaller. It did not. He knew Gavin wanted a backup vehicle. He said it was just in case the road closed. Every person involved had found a phrase that made the same act sound harmless. A conversation, a weekend, a backup route, a paper to keep people calm. Together, those harmless pieces had carried my daughter beyond the bridge. When I returned to the hall, Owen was waiting. My mother admitted she forged my signature, I said. She also confirmed Keith told Gavin the truck might be available if crews evacuated. Owen nodded once. We have a judge reviewing the warrant application now. For the truck in the bag? Yes. If it is signed tonight, the search will happen first thing in the morning. He did not promise what they would find, and I did not ask him to guess. I went back to Sadie's room. She had fallen asleep beneath the warming blankets. On the counter beside her bed, the nurse had placed the clear bag containing her damp clothes and scratched Apple Watch. I looked at the thin mark across the glass and thought about the person Sadie had trusted enough to leave school with. My daughter had not needed that watch because she had wandered away or forgotten a rule. She had needed it because the adult she believed was safest had looked her in the eye, told her I knew, and led her into Gavin's car. The search warrant was executed the next morning, while Sadie slept in a hospital room 2 floors above the emergency department. She had been cleared to go home once her temperature stabilized, but the doctors wanted to keep her until a trained child interviewer could speak with her. I spent the night in a chair beside her bed, waking each time she shifted beneath the blanket. Shortly after 8, Detective Owen Park asked me to meet him in a private consultation room. He carried a thin folder and a clear evidence photograph, not the waterproof duffel itself. The truck and bag were searched at the impound lot under the warrant, he said. I'm going to show you only what affects Sadie and the current investigation. He placed the first photograph on the table. Gavin had packed Sadie's identification and medical records, enough clothes for more than a week, a prepaid phone, and approximately $3,200 in cash. Owen said Gavin had retained some copies during the divorce, ordered a certified birth certificate as Sadie's legal parent, obtained a replacement Social Security card in September, and printed the medical records through a parent portal he still had permission to access. None of it belonged in a bag prepared for 2 nights at a cabin. The next photograph showed a printed address near Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, along with an entry code for a condominium owned by one of Gavin's former coworkers. The unit had been empty for months, and the owner confirmed the keypad code had not been changed since Gavin used the condo during an earlier work trip. He had not given Gavin permission to return with Sadie. Owen turned to another page. It was an enrollment packet for Pine Ridge Charter School in Idaho. Gavin had filled in the condominium as Sadie's residence. He listed himself as her only parent and emergency contact. The sections requesting my name, address, and consent had been left blank. The packet was prepared but never submitted, Owen said. The school did not enroll her, and this document gave him no legal authority. It matters because it shows what he was preparing to do. I read the address twice, before its meaning settled. Gavin had not planned to bring Sadie home on Saturday. The cabin near Wenatchee had never been the destination. It was a story designed for Mom, one that sounded disobedient but temporary. Gavin's real plan was to cross into Idaho, place Sadie in a borrowed condominium, and keep her far enough away that he could force me to negotiate from a position of panic. He had always believed possession created authority. If he held the money, I had to ask. If he controlled the car, I had to explain where I was going. If he controlled Sadie's location, he believed I would have to come to him. Owen showed me the false temporary travel and medical authorization. My name had been written beneath a statement claiming I approved the trip from November 19th through the 21st. Mom's signature appeared on the witness line. The page was not notarized and did not replace the court order. It was not a valid grant of custody. Gavin had packed it because he hoped official-looking paper would delay anyone who questioned him long enough for him to keep moving. Beneath it was a printed route that avoided the main traffic cameras between Cedar Hollow and the interstate. The waterproof bag also contained notes about fuel stops and the Idaho address, Owen said. This was prepared before yesterday. I thought of Gavin driving away from Shelter 6, with the duffel beside him. He had left his daughter beyond rising water, but protected the documents he believed would help him control what happened next. The truth had not appeared because of luck or a hidden recording. Gavin had carried it out of the flood himself. Owen opened the folder to a printed copy of messages recovered from synchronized account records and a tablet investigators seized under warrant. The version my brother sent us the day before had gaps. The recovered conversation did not. Gavin had written, "Once she is out of Naomi's reach, Naomi will finally listen." Keith's reply appeared beneath it. "I don't want details. Just don't use my name." I stared at the words until they stopped looking like a text message and became a decision. Keith might not have known about the condominium or the Idaho school packet, but he had known Gavin wanted to put Sadie beyond my reach. Instead of asking what that meant, he had asked not to be connected to it. "Did he explain why he deleted these?" I asked. Owen interviewed him again this morning. He admitted deleting the messages after I ordered him to preserve them because he was afraid the county would terminate his towing contract. He was worried about a contract while Sadie was still missing. "Yes," Owen said, without softening it. The county had suspended Keith's emergency subcontract while the investigation continued. It was not a final finding, and no one had taken his business away overnight. He simply no longer had access to county vehicles, lockboxes, or emergency routes while officials reviewed what he had done. The criminal investigation was also still developing. Owen explained the possible directions without pretending a conviction had already occurred. Gavin faced allegations connected to custodial interference, child endangerment, and the unauthorized taking of Truck 14. The forged document created additional exposure for both him and Mom. Keith's deleted messages were being reviewed for possible evidence tampering or obstruction. None of those words mattered to me as much as the empty space on the school packet where my name should have been. Before we left the hospital, a trained forensic interviewer spoke with Sadie in a child-friendly room while I waited nearby. I was not permitted to sit in, which was difficult but necessary. Sadie needed to tell what happened once, in her own words, without watching my face change. When the interview ended, the woman gave Owen a brief summary. Gavin had told Sadie that if police stopped them, she should say I knew about the trip and wanted her to spend time with him. Sadie believed him because Mom had already told her the same thing. I did not ask Sadie to repeat it for me. When she came back into the waiting room, I wrapped her coat around her shoulders and asked whether she wanted toast or soup before we went home. She chose toast because it was ordinary. I let ordinary be enough. That afternoon, I began closing every door my family had treated as theirs to open. I removed Mom and Keith from the school pickup list. I deleted them as emergency contacts and revoked every medical release that allowed them to speak for Sadie. I changed the family sharing permissions on her devices and confirmed that neither of them could view her location. Each change took less than a minute. For years, I had treated those permissions as symbols of trust and family closeness. Gavin had treated them as access points. Mom and Keith had treated them as privileges that survived any decision I made. They no longer did. Near evening, my attorney called. Mom's lawyer had contacted her with a request. Marjorie wanted one supervised meeting with Sadie, only long enough to explain that she had never intended for anyone to be hurt. I looked across the living room. Sadie was asleep on the couch beneath her paper fox blanket, one hand curled near the scratched watch on her wrist. Mom wanted a child she had deceived, to relieve the pain of finally seeing herself clearly. My answer did not require a discussion. She will not be used to make you feel forgiven. 3 weeks after the flood, the bruises on Sadie's legs had faded to yellow, and the scrape across her palm had closed beneath a thin line of new skin. Her body was healing faster than the part of her that still turned toward every unfamiliar engine. The first time a delivery van stopped outside our townhouse, she froze beside the kitchen counter and stared through the blinds until it drove away. At school, she asked her teacher to make sure no one waited behind her when the class lined up. She no longer liked people standing between her and the nearest door. I did not tell her she was safe, as though saying it could erase what had happened. I checked the locks with her once, showed her the new pickup list, and told her what would happen if someone unexpected came to school. Then I stopped, before reassurance became another form of pressure. Her trauma therapist kept the first session simple. Sadie could draw, use her paper animals, or sit without talking. She did not have to describe Shelter 6 every time a new adult entered the room. The forensic interview had already preserved her account. Healing did not require her to keep proving that the flood had frightened her. The legal process moved more slowly than fear did. Gavin had not been convicted. The criminal charges were still pending, and his attorney had entered not guilty pleas while challenging parts of the investigation. His bail conditions prohibited all direct and indirect contact with Sadie or me. Family court had issued another immediate temporary order, suspending every form of residential time and communication, while the modification case remained open. The final hearing had not happened yet, but Gavin could no longer use scheduled video calls, relatives, or the parenting application to reach Sadie. Mom had not been convicted either. Investigators had taken handwriting samples, copies of her messages with Gavin, and the devices she used before the trip. Her attorney insisted she had been manipulated, but no one could explain away the false signature or the lie she told Sadie at school. Keith's county subcontract remained suspended during the investigation. His company still operated, but he no longer had access to county gates, lockboxes, vehicles, or emergency routes. He had not lost everything overnight. He had lost the privileges connected to the information he misused. Those distinctions mattered. I did not need the courts to pretend the case was finished in 3 weeks. I needed the temporary protections to remain strong enough that Sadie could sleep without wondering who might arrive before the final decisions were made. Mom's attorney eventually requested a mediated conversation with me. Sadie would not attend. The meeting took place in a small conference room at my attorney's office, with Mom seated across from me beside her lawyer. Her ankle was still supported by a walking boot. She looked older than she had before the flood, but the sight of her injury no longer pulled me toward forgiveness. Pain could explain why someone needed help. It could not erase how they had placed themselves in danger. Mom folded her hands on the table. I know saying I am sorry is not enough. I believed Sadie needed time with her father, and I treated your fear like the problem. You forged my signature and lied to her because the truth would have stopped the trip. Her eyes filled. I understand that now. You understood enough then. You knew I had said no. The judge had restricted him, and Sadie would refuse if she knew the truth. You decided his title mattered more than the court order, my warning and her fear. The mediator asked what Mom wanted from the meeting. I want to know what I have to do for you to forgive me. She still wanted a process she could complete and a reward she could expect. This is not a checklist, I said. You do not attend counseling, write an apology, and earn access to Sadie. Change even if she never gives you what you want. I love her. Then respect the fact that she may never feel safe with you. The meeting ended without a schedule for future contact. Mom was permitted to send written communication through the attorneys, but nothing would be delivered to Sadie unless her therapist and I believed it would help her rather than burden her. Keith chose email instead of mediation. He wrote that Gavin had deceived him, that he never knew the destination was Idaho, and that he would carry the guilt of the flood for the rest of his life. He said he had deleted the messages because he panicked, not because he wanted to stop anyone from finding Sadie. I read the email twice before answering. You deleted the messages after Detective Park told you to preserve them. That was the moment you chose yourself over finding her. I did not argue about whether he was a good uncle. I did not list every Christmas or birthday he had attended. Being present during happy moments did not cancel what he did when telling the truth threatened his contract. That evening, Sadie sat cross-legged on the living room rug, repairing one of her paper foxes with clear tape. I had postponed discussing Mom's request until her therapist helped me choose language that did not make Sadie feel responsible for the adult's consequences. Grandma wants to apologize to you, I said. Sadie kept smoothing the tape over the fox's tail. Do I have to see her? No, I said. Is she still hurt? Her ankle is getting better. Sadie nodded, but she did not look relieved. She cried at the hospital, she said. Does she need to see me so she won't be sad? The question showed me exactly what Mom's request would have placed on her. Sadie was already measuring her own safety against an adult's discomfort. Her feelings belong to her, I said. Your safety belongs to us. She finally looked at me. Will she get in trouble if I don't forgive her? What happens in the investigation depends on what she did, not on whether you forgive her. Sadie turned the paper fox over in her hands. I don't want her near my school. She is no longer allowed to pick you up. Or our house. She will not come here. Maybe someday I could write something, she said, but I don't want to see her now. You do not have to decide what someday looks like. Her shoulders lowered slightly. She had made a choice about contact, not a decision about punishment. The court orders and safety rules were already in place. I had not handed a 10-year-old the responsibility of sentencing her grandmother. 2 days later, Cedar Hollow Elementary sent me a new emergency contact and pickup authorization form. The old version had contained Mom, Keith, and 2 relatives I had added years earlier because family was supposed to be the safest place to turn. I filled in my own name first. Then I added Sadie's teacher-approved emergency contact, a close friend who had respected every boundary during the divorce, and the designated school transportation service. 1 line remained empty. In the past, I would have filled it with a relative, simply because an empty space made our family look smaller. This time, I signed the form and left it blank. There would be no family exception. 4 months after the flood, the last dirty banks of snow were shrinking beneath the trees around Cedar Hollow Elementary. The mornings were still cold enough to fog the car windows, but the roads were dry, the river had returned to its banks, and Sadie had stopped asking whether rain was in the forecast before she packed her backpack. She was working on a paper fox for her class storytelling project. The first fox had survived Shelter 6, with 1 bent ear and a water stain across its tail. This one wore a blue paper scarf and had a tiny cardboard book tucked beneath one paw. Sadie placed it carefully inside her backpack, then checked that her Apple Watch was charged. The scratch across the glass was still visible. I had offered to replace the screen, but she said she wanted to keep it. It still works, she told me. I understood that answer. The watch did not need to become a monument to what happened. It was a tool with a damaged surface, still capable of doing an ordinary job. The difficult part was learning to let it remain ordinary. For weeks after Sadie returned to school, I checked her location every time she moved between buildings. If the blue dot paused near the gym or took too long to update, my hands would turn cold before my mind could remind me that signals lagged and children stopped to tie their shoes. I had escaped a man who treated constant access as proof of love. I did not want fear to teach me the same habit under a different name. Sadie's therapist helped us build rules together. Location sharing would stay on during field trips, after-school activities, or any time Sadie traveled without an adult we both knew. On normal school days, she could turn it off once she entered the building. She knew exactly who could see it, and no one could be added to family sharing without telling her. I was still her mother. I still made decisions about safety, but safety no longer meant that I had to watch every step she took. One morning, Sadie stood beside the front door and held up her wrist. "Do you want me to leave the location on all day?" The old answer rose first. Yes, because I needed proof that she was where she should be. Yes, because the last time I trusted someone else, she vanished. Yes, because knowing felt safer than not knowing. I looked at her face instead of the watch. "Are you going anywhere after school?" "No. Mrs. Grant is walking us to the library and back." "Then you can turn it off when you get inside." She studied me for a moment. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," I said. The question told me she had noticed my fear even when I tried to hide it. Letting go of the location was not only about trusting her, it was about proving that what Gavin had done would not become the rule governing the rest of her childhood. Mom's letter arrived that same week through Sadie's therapist. It was handwritten, 6 pages long, and sealed inside an envelope with Sadie's name on the front. The therapist gave it to me first, because that was the agreement. Nothing reached Sadie unless we believed it would help her rather than ask her to carry an adult's guilt. I read it alone at the kitchen table. Mom did not begin by saying Gavin had manipulated her. She did not say she had only wanted a child to know her father. For the first time, she wrote plainly that she knew I had not agreed, forged my name anyway, lied to Sadie, and treated the court order as an obstacle instead of a warning. She wrote that she had placed her belief above my authority as a mother, and above Sadie's fear. She admitted that being abandoned in Shelter 6 did not make her the victim of the story. At the end, she did not ask for a visit. She wrote that she was attending counseling and would continue whether Sadie ever chose to speak to her again. The letter was better than the apology she had offered across the mediation table. That did not make it a key back into our lives. I placed it in a locked drawer with the other legal documents. Someday Sadie might ask to read it. If she did, the decision would belong to her. Until then, she did not need 6 pages of an adult's remorse placed in her hands. Keith continued cooperating with investigators, surrendered his remaining county access codes, and began a program about coercive control. He still had no place in Sadie's daily life. Cooperation was what he should have offered before the flood, not a favor that earned immediate forgiveness. Gavin remained under the no-contact conditions while both cases continued. I no longer spent nights imagining what I would say if he were forced to listen. The important change was that I had stopped needing his admission before trusting my own judgment. On the first warm morning of March, I drove Sadie to school early for her storytelling presentation. Children crossed the parking lot carrying poster boards, costumes, and shoebox projects. Nothing about the scene looked extraordinary. That ordinary feeling frightened me for a second. Sadie opened the car door, then leaned back inside to check the zipper on her backpack. "The fox is still in there," I said. "You didn't crush him?" "I treated him like a very important passenger." She smiled and adjusted the watch beneath her sleeve. "Location off when I get inside?" "That's the plan." She stepped onto the sidewalk and joined 2 classmates near the entrance. I watched until she reached the doors. My hand moved toward my phone before I stopped it. She had entered the building with her teacher watching. The school had a new pickup list, new verification rules, and no family exceptions. I did not need a blue dot to repeat what I had already seen. I placed the phone face down in the cup holder. A moment later, it vibrated. For an instant, Shelter 6 returned in a rush. Water against metal. A progress bar refusing to move. My daughter's frightened voice traveling through a signal too weak to carry anything else. Then I saw Sadie's name and an audio message beneath it. I pressed play. I'm inside. The paper fox survived my backpack. I'm okay, Mom. Behind her voice, I heard lockers closing and children laughing. No floodwater, no wind, no adult telling her what she was allowed to say. I recorded a reply. I heard you. Have a good day. The first message from that watch came from a child trapped beyond floodwater, asking me not to risk my life to reach her. This one came from an ordinary school hallway. It was not a cry for help. It was my daughter speaking because she knew I would listen.